a great pleasure to introduce Melissa Johnson, our speaker for tonight. Some of you got your program already or saw your newsletter, so I'll read a little of that. And then I'm going to add a little bit more. But Melissa Johnson is the Executive Director of Wisconsin's Green Fire. Prior to this, Melissa served as the Director of Solid Waste Management for Marathon County and Portage County for over 2 decades. She has been an adjunct faculty at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point Soils and Waste Resource Program, and 7 terms as the president of the Associated Recyclers of Wisconsin, or ARO. She was appointed to the Governor's Blue Ribbon Task Force on Waste Materials Recovery and Disposal in 2005, and the DNR Waste and Materials Management Study Group 2016 to 2023, and DNR PFAS External Policy Advisory Group of 2021 to 2023. So I have worked with, worked with Melissa for several years since I've been at Recycling Connections, and she has always helped really women in waste. I have to give you a lot of credit for that. Women in waste, that's what we call ourselves. Because there's not a lot of us all the time. And it's really been great. She's really created a great foundation for others in the industry that have worked in the waste industry and recycling. And she was a great mentor during her time with the solid waste director in Marathon. And I'm really excited about her role as executive director with Green Fire. That's amazing. And I know you're doing amazing things. We worked together on some PFAS. I've learned so much from her, and I'm really excited for her to share her knowledge and perspective of this really interesting and important issue that's a lot more complex than perhaps you even have thought about. So hopefully you're walking away with a larger base on this really important issue and thinking about some things we can individually do to help do our part on it. So Melissa, welcome and thanks for being here.
Actually, recently I was referred to as the matriarch of waste.
How do you feel about that?
It was Bart Sexton, by the way.
Oh, okay.
When I started, first, how many are English majors in here? Obviously, I'm not. I forgot the apostrophe. I was in a hurry. And spell check didn't catch that. So it's my fault. When I started in the solid waste industry, I remember walking into the first conference. This was 2003, and it was at the Dells, 300 people. And I walk into the general hall, and it's populated with waste management professionals, recycling professionals, and all I could see was a sea of men. And many of them, most of them had white hair. And I went, what's wrong with this picture? And I made it my mission to try and bring more young people, primarily younger folks, because an organization, society cannot sustain itself without young people. And then to try and bring more women into the industry. One summer, I had 5 interns up at Marathon County from the waste management program. They were all women. And we were building landfill that summer, or at least a new couple of acres. So not a big project, but big enough. And my engineers said, we need to have a pre-construction meeting. So contractors are there, my engineers are there, and in walk my 5 women interns, and they all look and they go, this is the first time that's ever happened. And I'm like, hot damn, yes. Yeah. So I find myself with Wisconsin's Green Fire in a similar sort of situation. The world of conservation, natural resource conservation, is populated with a lot of men. And I'm not saying that's bad, that's simply the way it's been. Again, a lot of them are older. In order to sustain ourselves as Wisconsin's Green Fire, and I'll talk a bit more about that, or any industry, we really need to bring in fresh blood, because in my experience, I learn the most from people who are younger and ask the question, why the heck are you doing that? So I find myself doing the same thing I did in waste, is now asking, how do we incorporate more people of diverse backgrounds? How do we incorporate more women? How do we incorporate and welcome younger people? People from all walks of life. You shouldn't have to be a scientist to want clean air, clean water, and a resilient future. So I do have some stuff I'll hand out later. And I want to get past that slide with my grammar mistake. So some of you may know me, I'll get past that. In those capacities, I also served on Stevens Point's Common Council and Portage County Board. Every time I come back to this room, I'm always happy. I was on the Commission on Aging for 6 years, so the ADRC committee. We should all be so grateful for the people that work in this building. They are absolutely amazing. Cindy Petruski is outstanding, and her staff is there for everybody in this community in their time of need. We should always feel so grateful. So it's a pleasure being back in this room. Okay, let's try this. There we go. So what are PFAS? I want to say it was I think it was 2018. I didn't know what a PFAS was. I hadn't heard the acronym. Now, when I worked in the nuclear industry, I worked in the solid waste industry, I worked in the emergency management industry. All of those industries are packed full of acronyms. I had never heard of PFAS. So that summer, it was July of that summer. No, take it back. It was April of that year. And I got a letter from a gentleman. His name was Mark Timke. It still is Mark Timke. And actually, he's a Green Fire member, as Nichols. And anybody else a Green Fire member? Oh, we've got to fix that. Got this letter from attorney Mark Timke, representing Domtar Paper Mill in Rothschild. Now, in landfills, of course, we accumulate liquid in the landfill. Precipitation falls on the waste. It has to be captured, and that captured liquid has to be taken for wastewater treatment. So we pump it out, put it in a tanker truck, and we were taking it to Domtar. They have a wastewater treatment facility there. Our leachate was high in ammonia and nitrogen, which is good because they needed that to break down the lignin in their wastewater. So it was a really good relationship. Close by, they weren't charging us anything. Because of our nitrogen, they didn't have to add as much. And all of a sudden, Mr. Timke sends me this letter and says, as of May 1st, Domtar Paper Mill will no longer accept leachate from the Marathon County Solid Waste Department because we believe it has PFAS in it. I went, huh? What? So I Googled, and I went, oh crap. So what do? Well, number one, I start learning. Anytime when I'm faced with a challenge, or any of us should, you want to learn. What does it mean? What is it? What does it mean? How do we fix it? So I got to work and found alternatives for taking the leachate because the facility produced 203 landfills, about 18 million gallons of leachate a year. You got to take it somewhere. So I'm learning about PFAS, and at the same time, I'm finding out the DNR is convening stakeholder groups for wastewater treatment facilities, but they're carving out solid waste because they saw solid waste as a producer of PFAS. They saw wastewater treatment facilities as passive receivers. So you're flushing the toilet, you're washing your hands, whatever you're doing. Landfills do not produce PFAS. We don't use it anywhere. We take all the stuff that you don't want, we bring it into the landfill, and many times, as we'll see it, all the things that PFAS are in, we have it. The leachate is going to contain it. I was a little upset that solid waste was carved out as somehow a problem, when in fact, what we do every single day in the world of solid waste is work to protect human health and the environment. So I started stamping my size 5s and said, hey, DNR, pay attention to the world of solid waste. We can help you solve this problem with PFAS. We need to be a part of the discussion. So from 2018 to about mid-2019, I was learning. I was attending meetings. I was standing up for the landfills and recycling, because recycling facilities are also passive receivers of PFAS. And all of a sudden now I'm asked, Governor Evers comes into office and he said, would you like to serve on our external policy advisory committee? And I said, you bet. And learning more, again, how do we solve this problem? So what are PFAS? Polyfluorinated alkyl, perfluorinated alkyls, polyfluorinated alkyls. They're just a complicated term for a category of about 10,000 chemicals. All kinds, but they all start with a carbon and a fluorine bond. So this right here. Any chemists in the room? Me either. I had 10 credits and that was enough for me. I didn't want any more. But you can see the carbon fluorine bond, carbon fluorine. This is PFOA or PFOS, PFOA. These are the two longest chains. You can see this long chain. They are the two longest chains and what we now refer to as legacy PFAS. These are the ones that were produced by DuPont early on and 3M early on. They are now not available in the United States because we've learned, we knew a long time ago that they were toxic. We knew in the 60s that they were toxic, but they kept using them. Until about 2001, when they were phased out. So when they were phased out, guess what they did? They, 3M, DuPont, other manufacturers, they said, we still want the quality of that product. So the quality is, this tail is lipophobic and hydrophobic. So it resists water, it resists grease, and this other end actually can hold water. So it's a weird combination. It's one of the weirdest chemicals around. And how many of you ever had a burger that was wrapped in a nice wax, you think it's a wax wrapper? That's PFAS. That paper is coated with a PFAS coating to make sure that that burger, that grease doesn't drip onto your nice new suit, which I appreciate because I've had it happen to me. So it is unique. It is a surfactant. It changes the surface tension on anything it comes in contact with. So it was used in the war effort. They looked at using it to change the surface tension on airplane wings. So this World War II, I should say. And it's been used in a number of different applications. The challenge is it doesn't break down very easily. It resists some of the highest temperatures. Early on, when we started to say, my gosh, we have a problem with PFAS, we want to start collecting these things, the soils, all of the contaminated materials, let's incinerate them. Nope. All they were doing was saying, poof, right up the smokestacks, and they were dispersing the PFAS out into the atmosphere. So now even the DoD, Department of Defense, has issued a memorandum saying no more incineration until we figure out what temperature will actually pull that carbon and fluorine bond apart and actually then make free fluorine and carbon. We haven't figured that one out yet. We're actually looking at, there are a number of destructive technologies, and believe it or not, one of them is being looked at in Stevens Point. How many of you go to the square and buy mushrooms from Jerome Segura? Me. Jerome, when I was with Marathon County, I contracted with him to conduct an experiment. What we did was we took leachate, we saturated some media with it, and then he used a variety of fungus to see if we could change the character of the PFAS. So in other words, use fungus to naturally remediate. We had some success, but we don't know if we created something worse because we saw a change. We saw a change in the PFAS. They are rugged. They are durable. They bioaccumulate. We all have them in our bodies. Polar bears have them in their blood. They're there. And I learned something new because I co-presented with a woman, a medical doctor. And she talked about how it biomagnifies as well. So what it does is, as it bioaccumulates, if you have other medical issues, it can magnify some of those issues. So it is a sticky, sticky problem. And then the most studied and regulated right now are the PFOA and PFOS, as I said. However, even though they're not used in manufacturing in the United States, they are used around the world yet, except in the European countries. They're also banned there. So, but if you're buying, let's say, rain gear, that is outdoor gear that is rain resistant, and you're buying it from a source where it's made, let's say Thailand, very likely it could have a longer chain PFAS on it. I know that's what I was gonna say. When in 2001, when they said, let's get rid of those long chains because those are the ones that have the longest half-life. Let's create something else because we love this product. So they created Gen X. Gen X is only 6 carbon, 6 fluorine chain. So they thought if it's shorter, certainly it has to be better. It's not going to be as toxic. Gen X has been in use to replace PFOA, PFOS since 2001. Guess what's now showing up as problematic as a contaminative emerging concern in groundwater wells around the country? Gen X. We're really good at messing things up. We're not so good at trying to figure out how to fix them. So where did this all start? I like that guy. Looks like my grandson when he's trying to help me cook. Grandma, can I help? Oh, gosh, I don't know. So Roy J. Plunkett, this guy right here, this is a reenactment from 1961, but Dr. Plunkett is the one who inadvertently discovered the qualities of PFAS, so that fluorinated compound that was really desirable. It was an accident. Now, things like that do happen, but this truly was an accident. They were researching the fluorinated compounds, but one that came out was PFTE, which is Teflon. So, well, you can see in 1934, the Germans had been working on this as well. And again, it's changing the surface tension, which is critical if you're working on aircraft or missiles or any of those things. Having a coating that will reduce friction is absolutely critical. But Mr. Plunkett and his team, you always hear about Mr. Plunkett, you never hear about Jack Reebok, and I don't know if he wanted to slide into obscurity because he knew he created something that was really bad. But they found that it had characteristics that were going to be helpful by accident. They had chilled it, it fell onto a desk, and all of a sudden they went, hey, we can use this. DuPont then trademarks it as Teflon. Mr. Plunkett, Dr. Plunkett, owned that trademark for the bulk of the time. So I think he made a few bucks, I'm not sure. During the war effort, this is the Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Manhattan Project site. They actually used PFAS Teflon to keep on the gaskets to keep uranium from actually contaminating the folks working there. And then you can see 3M kind of grabs onto it. It goes, we're going to make some money on it. DuPont starts manufacturing it as Teflon. Then 3M goes, hey, if it changes the surface tension on things, I think we can make some money as a stain repellent. Which, yesterday, my daughter dropped a Hershey's bar on the seat of my brand new car in little bits, and it was warm in the car. This is terrible to say, I was very thankful for stain repellent upholstery on my brand new, less than 2,000 mile car. So Scotchgard, anybody who's ever had Scotchgard on your clothing, on your shoes, on your carpet, on your upholstery, you've had PFAS in your house. When I first started working on the PFAS External Policy Advisory Committee, Dr. Sarah Yang from the Department of Health Services gave a presentation, and she said, and this was 2020, maybe 2021, the #1 source for exposure for children, toddlers, was the dust in their home. Because every time you take that stain resistant carpet or rug and you're vacuuming, You're pulling it up and you're releasing it into the air. Every time you run the dryer and you've got a fabric softener there, you're releasing that. It's used in our households all the time. It's provided us with a fair amount of luxury. And again, the company Tefal was made. For the longest time, all I ever wanted was Tefal pots and pans. They were luxury. I do not own any anymore. I now own stainless steel, cast iron, and carbon steel. I have phased out all of my Teflon, but it's inexpensive. You can buy some Teflon pans for a couple of bucks, maybe $5, $10. And if you're, let's say, income challenged, and your choice is a stainless steel pan, which will help you keep your family safer using stainless steel versus PFAS coated Teflon, you're going to make a choice on the most affordable. So this gets into a little bit of social justice and environmental justice. Poor people, unfortunately, people who are income challenged, are faced with those kind of decisions all of the time. I did a presentation recently on PFAS, environmental justice, and the crossover of social justice. And this is one of the examples I used. Here's some more places. I rode my bike here this evening. I do not own any Teflon chain oil. In fact, like I go down to Pab's, that's where I got my bike from. That's where I take it back to for repairs. And went in one time and I said, I need some chain oil. And Todd, one of the employees, reaches over and he gives me this. And I said, Todd, do I have to come over there and beat the hell out of you? No. He looked at me and I said, no Teflon. Do you have something else? Well, yeah, we have an oil-based derivative. Oh, can I have that? And he goes, well, you'll have to add it more frequently. Arm. Yeah, I can do that. So chain lubricant. Pipe tape. I don't know how many times I've done that. Every summer when you put the hose back on, I always add pipe tape, Teflon. Scotch guard. Rain resistant outer gear, paint. So when you go to paint, y'all like it, right? It glides on so beautifully. Do you know why? PFAS. It's used in the solar panel industry and the semiconductor industry because of its resistance. Makeup. I remember sitting in a meeting once and all of the governor's administrative agencies were there representative and people were going, this is terrible. Someone needs to do something. Going around the table, terrible, terrible. And finally I had a chance to speak on behalf of the solid waste industry. And I said, yes, this is a terrible, terrible problem. I said, but there's so many, good looking people here. You're all so well attired. How many of you are wearing all day makeup? And I could see a few of the women going, well, wait a minute, this is a trick question, right? Yes. And I said, when you start saying this is terrible and someone has to do something about it, you've just washed your hands of your responsibility. When you made a choice, just like I made a choice to buy a new car with stain resistant upholstery, when we make these consumer decisions, we actually force manufacturers to keep doing what they're doing. They got a little timid after that, but. And of course, one of the big one is AFFF, aqueous film forming firefighting foam. Can't ever say that, AFFF. Now, if you're in an airplane or a jet and the pilot comes on and says, ladies and gentlemen, please buckle up. Get in the emergency position because we're going to try and crash land. You're going to hope that the airport has an adequate supply of this very complex firefighting foam because it doesn't break down in high heat. It manages chemical fires beautifully. Now they're starting to look at some alternatives, but what's happened is right now, the federal government requires all major airports all major airports, so O'Hare, JFK, LaGuardia, all of them, to have a FFF on hand. They're starting to change this up. That's why the Department of Defense has had such a big stockpile, because they needed it for the very same reason. In fact, if you remember, I think some of you won't because you're too young. I think it was 1961 USS Forrestal. There was a terrible, terrible accident. A missile went in and blew up some of the planes that were on the deck of the aircraft carrier. Hundreds of sailors died. It was horrible. That's what really prompted the expanded use of FFF. Now, again, balancing out essential need. If this is going to be used to save people's lives in the event of a complex fire, a chemical fire, the Husky oil refinery up in Superior, when that burned, they used FFF. Now they're trying to figure out what to do with the residual. But again, trying to balance it, it's helped us, but it's also harming us. And sadly, our food. I know that's not what you want to hear, but it is what's happening. And it's not because anyone is being, mean-spirited, nefarious, and trying to corrupt all of America by feeding us PFAS. But we have a constant deposition of PFAS. It's there. We've sent enough of it into the atmosphere that it'll come down and it will contaminate. It contaminates forests. That's why, again, polar bears have it in their blood. We also have a practice of land application of biosolids, sludge. And the sludge can come from municipal wastewater treatment facilities, so every time you flush the toilet, or it can come from industry, primarily paper mills. The byproduct, the biosolids, the sludge, actually have nutritive value. It is legal to land apply sludge, and we do it quite a bit in Wisconsin, and we do it across the country. We did that with the DNR's permits. Nobody was doing anything illegal. What we found out recently, how many of you have heard of the town of Stella in Oneida County? Okay, town of Stella is along the Pelican River. It's near Rhinelander. Now let me qualify this. I am not telling you there is a direct relationship. I'm telling you there is a correlation between the land applied paper mill sludge from the Tomahawk and Rhinelander area and the amount of PFAS that are showing up in the groundwater in the town of Stella. The soils are rich with PFOA, PFOS, and other legacy contaminants. Those mills are what we call coated mills. So in other words, they use a type of coating in their process because, well, we want to have that McDonald's package not drip grease on us. We want to have that food package. We probably all have packaging in our pantries that have some kind of coating on it. It's designed to keep the products fresh. It's designed to keep the product safe from ultraviolet light, etc. The town of Stella has filed a class action lawsuit against the Tomahawk mill, or was it the Rhinelander mill? I forget which. So they've land applied the sludges and then they've grown crops, or cattle have grazed, or sheep. There's some sheep up in that area. So plants do uptake it. Now that's bad for us if we're eating it, but there is also hope because another group right here in Stevens Point at UWSP, I love this community, is actually looking at ways they can remediate large parcels of land that are contaminated with PFAS. And what they're looking at is using one of two things. One is alfalfa because it has really good uptake of the PFAS, or cannabis. Cannabis has really good uptake of PFOA, PFOS, they believe. And the reason I got involved because they wanted recommendations on how to manage it as end of life. I said, you got to send it to a landfill because you can't burn it. and you don't want to have a joint with PFAS in your cannabis. So we're seeing PFAS showing up in our food supply. I'm not telling you that to scare you. I'm just telling you it is the truth. How can you avoid it? You could probably avoid it by buying organic food that's never had the land had biosolids applied. Grow your own. But if you want a strawberry in December or January, this is the reality of how we live. So awareness is there. A lot of this is legacy. I think as we start becoming more aware, we start phasing out certain practices, we will see a change. And here's the crazy cycle. You know, you produce it at the in industry, you send that wastewater to a wastewater treatment facility. Unfortunately, there could be leaks, then you're getting some in the groundwater. You're maybe discharging to a stream, which is what was alleged with DuPont in West Virginia. They just went, you know, send it downstream, who cares, right? And send it to a wastewater treatment facility. And again, we don't have a good destructive technology. All we do is treat it. So we capture the PFAS using granulated activated carbon, reverse osmosis, or ion resin exchange. Those are the only 3 practical treatment systems in use today. And what they do is they grab those compounds and they store them in the filter or in the condensate with the RO or in the resins. Guess what happens to all that stuff when it's spent? Where do you think it goes? Landfills. So you can see industry is sending stuff to landfills, wastewater treatment stuff are sending stuff to landfills. This is this complicated, they're sending biosolids over to farms. This is the complicated cycle. Households are buying product, they're flushing their toilets. This is the mad PFAS cycle. When I first started getting involved with this, residents were listed as totally innocent, being impacted by all of this. There were no arrows coming from the households, only going to the households. So they were being impacted. I said, hey, wait a minute. They are part of this system. And this has now changed to reflect that households, along with industry and everybody else, we are all responsible. So that's why we have a love-hate relationship. And until we're ready to make a change, you know, we can make some consumer choices. Like I feel very fortunate to have phased out all of my Teflon cookware to something else. But then here's the other side of it. I realized when my last stainless steel pan arrived, big sturdy thing. And I don't know why I didn't catch this sooner. In the process of metal plating, there's generally, well, chromium is involved, and chromium is a carcinogen, and it becomes airborne very easily at metal plating and metal finishing facilities like Crystal Finishing in Wausau. Do you know what they do to mist at those facilities to grab the chromium out of the air and keep people from getting cancer? PFAS. Once again. So I'm standing there with that pan and went, shit. Yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but at least I've had one impact, and that was at the metal plating facility. I don't repeat it by every time I use my Teflon pan, wash it, and send the PFAS down the drain or contaminate my family. This is a complex cycle. There aren't easy solutions. But I think we can make easy choices. I don't think we need all day makeup. I don't wear makeup anyway. There's certain brands of dental floss. Glide is one of them. The reason it glides is because of PFAS. So we can make other choices. There are some websites out there, and I forgot to bring that list along. I can make that available to Susan, that can help you make some decisions on better choices. There are manufacturers out there, particularly with outerwear, so your rain gear, your camping gear, they are making active decisions to phase this stuff out. Remember the BPE, or BPA issue with baby bottles, the bisphenol A? Parents were crazy. And they said, we are done buying plastic bottles that is sending this chemical into our babies' bodies. And they did. They, such an uproar that what did manufacturers do? They got rid of the BPA. So I think as consumers, we can say, we don't want this in our products. Help us phase this out. Consumers have trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of power that they don't use. We just go to the store, hand the debit card and go, yay. So I will get you that list of websites that are credible and very helpful in helping you make better decisions. Helping me make better decisions, but ultimately, you know, sometimes we just don't have a choice. Like when I bought my brand new car, I couldn't take out the seat and ask to have a new seat, you know, put in there that didn't have stain resistant upholstery. Biden administration has been working on this. This is a long time in coming. Categorizing PFAS as hazardous substances under CERCLA does one very important thing. And CERCLA is a Superfund law. No, there's no money in the Superfund fund. That was a long time ago. But what that does is it makes it easier for people harmed by PFAS, so municipalities and individuals, to go after the responsible parties. This is critical. Wausau right now has filed lawsuit against 3M because they have contaminated, that's the claim, they have contaminated all 6 of their water wells. So it will make it easier for Wausau to actually go after the responsible party. It will make it easier for anybody harmed by PFAS to go after the responsible party. So what this also does is it starts setting up a standard. You go from hazardous substance to hazardous material. Then you go to hazardous waste. So when we start doing that, I think we'll start seeing a change in how this stuff is managed. Right now, everything's going to Subtitle D landfills. Those are non-hazardous landfills. So if we want to see this stuff truly destroyed, we have to start moving in this process. And they've also, this is out of the Biden administration, we've been waiting for a long time. So a lot of states have already implemented minimum contaminant levels for PFOA, PFOS, and a number of others. These down here. Wisconsin dragged their feet. Now I'm going to get into a little bit of political posturing because the leadership in our Senate and Assembly were reluctant to try and set any standards that would be harmful to Wisconsin industry. To heck with the people who are drinking the water, and the municipalities are trying to struggle with this. So we had none. This is the new drinking water standards that will be implemented. And again, this is a phase in. This is expensive. We need to recognize that if we're going to protect our water and protect the humans drinking them, it will cost money. Wausau's water rates did go up. My dear friend Katie Rosenberg did not win her reelection, in part because she was blamed for the increase in water rates because they had to treat that water. So we now have national primary drinking water regulation, finally. In Wisconsin, we do have surface water standards. Finally, that was actually passed. And this is being used primarily, it's not as though we're going to go out and condemn a lake. This is used for when your surface water is being used as a source of drinking water. Now I want to get into a little bit of this. I just got this information, I think on Friday. No, what was a week ago? I don't know, time flies. Anyway, we were on, Wisconsin's Green Fire. My wildlife experts and I were on a conference call with a wildlife biologist from the DNR. And he goes, oh yeah, that's right. He goes, I hear you're doing PFAS too. And he goes, we did some sampling of eagles for PFAS levels. And I went, you know what? I know a group of people who would be very interested in this data. So I have permission of DNR. As you can see, I'm giving them recognition here. What they're finding is similar sort of toxicity. So in humans, we're finding endocrine issues, thyroid issues, including cancer, testicular issues, including cancers, growth issues, increase in diabetes with people with high levels of PFAS. So the same for eagles. Isn't he cute? At the landfill, we had eagles and there was just so much fun watching them. Unfortunately, they would scavenge in the landfill. And we had an eagle one time that was nearly killed because someone put, we believe, their euthanized pet in the garbage. And one of my interns, one of the female interns, found this eagle, full-grown eagle, kind of flopping around and acting like it was out of it. And we immediately thought lead poisoning, and they called Raptor Education and they gathered up the eagle, took it up there, and it was the pentachloral, whatever it is that's used as the euthanasia drug. We had a very strict, not me, I know, don't work there, very strict protocol because we would have horses and other cattle that had been euthanized. Very strict protocol. They had to be buried 10 feet deep. We would dig a trench. We would bury it to ensure that no animals, no predators would eat it. But the best we can figure is somebody put a dead animal in their garbage. That eagle did survive. Thank God for Raptor Education Center, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in a minute. So here we have, let's see, Upper Wisconsin River and Lower Wisconsin. Look at, yeah, that's us folks for PFOS and what they sampled for eagles. So clearly, something is happening. There is a fish consumption advisory north of Stevens Point on the Wisconsin River. There is also one south of Stevens Point. Right here, we're actually doing fairly well, but I think what's coming down off the Dubay Dam is settling along in the stream before it gets down here. But this is what we have for PFOS. And this, I believe, is PFOA, if I remember correctly. And once again, Lower Wisconsin River, Wisconsin River, Upper Wisconsin River. You can see, there they are, the different PFAS compounds. So they are showing up. This is actually Lake Superior and the Apostle Islands. Yeah. There's some sampling being done in the Barron County area and then just north of there. They are finding PFAS in lakes and rivers there that they believe is being deposited or had been from 3M plants out of the Twin Cities. That's the only thing that the researchers can think of for those levels of PFAS in those lakes and rivers. They're isolated, there's no housing around them, there's not even camping. So that's the only thing they can think of. So a little bit, I gotta do the commercial, sorry. A little bit about Green Fire. We are a nonprofit organization. We are membership based. My wages are paid by the good people who believe in this organization. We are a science-based organization, and our origins really were right around, I want to say this first Scott Walker administration, and I think we all know that many folks left the DNR, many folks left the university. They had tenure, they had enough, they left. They knew that science was no longer appreciated. We saw it. We saw the increase in economic evaluation. being predominant over science when it came to natural resources and environmental policy. The folks that left are the founders of Green Fire. They said, they left and they all said, we're gonna go fishing, we're just gonna go bum for a bit. And then they went, wait a minute. We are scientists, we are researchers, we are subject matter experts, and we are not done. And they got together at the Aldo Leopold Shack. And over a weekend, they said, let's do this. Let's start an organization that uses science to develop the best policy possible. And so these subject matter experts have been working since then in work groups and as teams to help advance sound policy for Wisconsin. It is such a pleasure to work with some of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life. I have learned the difference between old growth forests and mature forests. I'm learning about wildlife biology. I'm learning about the public trust doctrine. These people are amazing because we believe everybody deserves clean water, clean air, and a sound future. These are our work groups, as you can see, in subject matter experts. You might go, hey, they look a little bit like the silos at DNR. Yes, this is how they formulated themselves, but I'm actually working to get all of them. We have a meeting on Wednesday, actually next week's Wednesday, to find cross collaboration between all of those. How can we work together as a team instead of silos? Again, we help to develop the science to advance policy. We work with partners like Clean Wisconsin, the River Alliance, League of Conservation Voters, MEA, Midwest Environmental Advocates, that is, and a host, Audubon Society, Wisconsin Society of Ornithology. These are all of our partners. So we work together. Once we've formulated the science, we get things together. Now we start knocking on doors and talking to legislators and regulators and say, how can we make the best policy possible? And through public outreach, and my favorite one, working with the next generation. Actually, I'm having lunch with one of our scholars tomorrow. Thought you guys might be interested in this too. This is a research project that we just we completed phase 1, as you can see. So Marge Gibson and a number of other people who are rehabbers reached out to Wisconsin Green Fire members who are wildlife experts, wildlife biologists, and said, we are seeing an increase in illegally killed or injured large non-game birds. As scientists, we said, okay, let's figure out how to quantify that. Because rehabbers don't have a system there's a variety of systems, and some of it is going, yep, I'm gonna write it down, that's a bird, looks like it was sick, maybe lead poisoning, and then they fold it up and put it here. Others have more sophisticated systems. So Carrie Beheller, who is a wildlife biologist, she said, I'm gonna take this on. We got funding through the Dutton Foundation out of Merrill, and phase 1 is completed, and what we found was clearly an increase in the number of illegally killed and injured non-game birds. This just kills me. I was 32 years old. I was born in 1956. I was 32 years old before I saw my first eagle in the wild. Why would anyone kill an eagle? I just don't get it. Why would you kill a hawk? I mean, come on. A sandhill, a trumpeter swan. Really? Put the gun down. Use your head. So this is the evidence that we have that shows there is an increase. What we need is a systematic process for reporting. What we want to do in phase 2. This is our phase 2 outputs and outcomes. We're hoping to build a statewide database in collaboration with the DNR. We're also working with all rehabbers. Wisconsin Society of Ornithology has now indicated their interest in helping to fund this. We have a $10,000 donor already. This is a $35,000 project. Unless I can find an unsuspecting graduate student to work for less. But what we want to do is to create enough data so that we can actually start mapping this and going to legislators and saying, let's do something. Let's put more money in enforcement. Person killing an eagle, we need to track that person down and prosecute them. But right now, there's not enough resources. So our goal is to build this database. We're also we're working with the Wisconsin School of Veterinary College, and they are interested in helping us develop a methodology for intake that is consistent across all rehabbers so that we have good, reliable data. We're also interested in trying to create some workshops on necropsies that would be consistent. So in other words, a bird presents with what appears to be lead poison, but in fact has bird flu. We want to be able to identify those trends very early on. So a lot of partners right now, I have about $15,000 of the money I need for this. I will continue to work on this. I'm actually going to be meeting with the International Crane Foundation Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. So I couldn't resist this because
Lord.
Yeah.
I went to UW Green Bay. My degree is in environmental policy and planning, and Dr. Mike Kraft was my one lead professor. He was part of negotiating the Great Lakes contract and then our compact, but he also worked on the Fox River cleanup and the Bay of Green Bay cleanup for PCBs. So this was in the 90s when I was at GB. And I just remember thinking that was the most awful thing possible, all those PCBs. Well, no, let's cross it off the list because now we've got PFAS. So happy to take questions on, here's some contact information, but I've also got these too for everybody. So happy to take questions. I know I talked a long time, sorry. Yeah, no.
I have a question about fish in Lake DeBay versus downstream of the dam of Lake DeBay. Now, we sometimes catch walleyes and will occasionally eat some. We wonder, first of all, is the larger the fish, the more likely it'll have more PFAS instead of a smaller fish?
That is my understanding from what I'm getting from my fish biologists.
That's what I would guess.
Yeah. Because it bioaccumulates and biomagnifies.
So is it more dangerous in Lake DeBay than it is here at the Wisconsin River in Stevens Point?
I don't know the answer to that. DNR would know the answer. I could probably find out for you if you wanted me to. I don't know if I know they're doing sampling all along the river. I don't think DeBay was identified as a fish advisory area.
Oh, that's good.
Downstream, I think what's happening is it's moving, and as it's moving, being pulled through the dam, and this is what I've been told, it's being pulled through the dam, it's pulling through and then it slows. So when it slows, as you know, the sedimentation occurs and you have that filtering out. But if you want, I will double check on that. Questions? Yeah.
Does bioaccumulate mean you never can be rid of it, or is there?
Well, like with PCBs, so my body is filled with PCBs because I dated a guy for 10 years who was a big fisher on Lake Michigan. It's all we ate. So that stays with you. PFAS have a half-life. Some of them are short, so a few months, some are much longer. So you do shed them, and some of them, the longer chains want to attach to fatty tissue. Yeah. Wish I could say yes, just drink lots of water and you'll be fine, or drink a lot of bourbon and then you won't care. Next question. Yeah.
So we have a private well and we had our water tested. The county had a free,
Oh, sure.
yeah. And so PFAS wasn't on the list,
No.
and would it not be? Is there a way to get that tested or?
You can, there's only a few labs in Wisconsin that are certified to sample and test for PFAS. To give you an idea, the PFAS are measured when we're sampling for those new standards, parts per trillion, so nanograms. If a technician is gonna go out and sample your well, the advisory is don't use any deodorant, don't bathe for several days, and don't eat fast food. Because your body will naturally exude potential cross-contamination. Yeah. It's,
Complicated.
It is
more
very-
complicated than you would
Yeah.
think, yeah.
but you can sample, it's rather expensive, and the reason the county didn't do it is they're just testing for public health parameters. So that's just a simple list. When we would sample we had 94 groundwater wells in Marathon County. We sampled twice a year. We did those public health parameters, elevations, and other things. A list, 2 pages of volatile organic compounds. Now they're also adding on the PFAS. But you can do it if you want. I can get both of you that information or give it to Susan and she can share it out, those labs, but it's several, $500–600 per test. I cannot think of a reason you would have to be worried where you are. Yes. Anything else? Yeah.
I think you were saying that a lot of these PFAS are leachate from landfills.
So when you throw something in the garbage, of course, it's just going to the landfill. When water hits the garbage, it percolates through, it's captured at the bottom of the landfill, and the liner does not get into the groundwater. I want to make that clear. Modern landfills do not contaminate groundwater. What happens is because you have to take that liquid out, because you're only allowed 1 foot of head on the liner, otherwise you rupture the liner with that hydraulic pressure. So you take out that liquid, you pump it out, send it to a wastewater treatment facility for treatment. Both primary and secondary treatment before it goes out into a waterway. That is where the leachate, the PFAS in the leachate, that process, because wastewater treatment facilities currently do not treat for PFAS.
If they could, is that true?
They could, but you have to first, the system would be like this, because those are large flows, right? Wastewater treatment facilities. The current techniques for treatment are generally low flow, high concentration. So you would first have to have a reverse osmosis system to get that concentrated liquid. Then you would take that concentrated liquid and run it through an ion resin exchange or a granulated activated carbon filter. That process is very expensive. Right now, most places are focused on treating water to get people safe water. Most wastewater treatment facilities have not yet employed those techniques to treat for those things. Then your rates are going to go up. Yeah.
If you are in a rural area, let's take a hypothetical in a CAFO, a concentrated animal feeding operation with 5,000 or 10,000 cattle are right next to your property. And they accumulate waste over the winter and then they put manure on their farmland. Is that going to be a risk factor for you living right next door to a CAFO?
From a PFAS perspective or
Yeah.
other groundwater perspective?
Let's start with the PFAS.
So from a hypothetical perspective, I'm going to use a real experience that several farmers in, I think it's in Maine or Vermont, I don't remember which, actually experienced. Their cattle's milk was so contaminated with PFAS from eating hay from fields that had been land applied with biosolids. So we have to assume, and that I only know about the milk contamination. I would assume in the excrement or the urine that they were shedding some PFAS. Is there a potential? Certainly. I cannot be 100% until you would run the science. Again, I'm representing a science-based organization. You would want to sample for those things. Now, I've been asked to consult in the town of Lind in Wapaka County. They have a big CAFO in their community. They want to install a manure digester, which in a lot of cases is a better management system than raw, manure being spread. But they also want to bring in food waste and non-recyclable papers, which go well in a digester because they boost methane production, especially if you're going to generate renewable natural gas or electricity with your methane. So the town is concerned that this addition of about 200 to 250 ton a day of food waste, that food, remember this picture, and non-recyclable papers, so those wrappers that you throw out with your McDonald's, will contain PFAS and will end up in the digestate and will end up in the liquid that will be sprayed across the land. So it's in the system. Yeah.
Would it be more dangerous after a sewage pool accumulation for the winter months and then spread on the fields in the springtime?
I'm not sure. I don't know if they would be a lighter fraction or a heavier fraction. If they're a heavier fraction, I think logic tells us it would settle. And because those get dredged every now and again, typically they'll grab the liquid fraction and apply that after it's out there. It's a good question. Good research project, probably to figure that one out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? I love smart people. It's just so much fun. Good questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had these out, hand them out.